For this session, we're going to be hearing from Roché Compaan.
Compaan.
He's going to be talking about leveling up your developer experience with Kubernetes. Roché, when you've got 5 minutes left, I'll wave at you from the back.
Thank you.
And we'll have some time at the end for questions.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to share this experience, this talk with you. This has been my first in-person conference in quite some time. And I'm really passionate about this topic, not only because I have explored solutions to it, but it opens the floor to hear what you use to improve your own developer experience and to tell me how I can improve my own. So I'm looking forward to that interaction. I am many things, but I am at heart a full stack programmer. And I've been really passionate about DevOps for 26 years now. I founded a small software consultancy in 1998 called Upfront Software. We celebrated 26 years of existence. Some of my own old colleagues are even here. We still service some clients locally, but I now primarily consult to a US-based Python dev shop and cloud specialists called 6 Feet Up. They are in Indianapolis, Fishers in Indianapolis, and my focus there was really to improve the developer experience for the whole team. And we develop custom software. We work on many different projects, so I get to experience onboarding onto new projects all the time. And I have a good sense of, how frustrating it can be if it takes you 3 days to set up a development environment. So it's been a passion of mine. I've actively looked for solutions. That's what I'm going to talk about today. I love dog agility. I have attended the IFCS World Champs with my dog for 3 years in a row. We've won medals. It's been a great experience. I'm not doing that so much. Now I'm into nerding out on running. I set a PR of 3 hours and 21 minutes in April in a marathon in France in a lovely small little countryside town called Saumur. And I live on the east coast of South Africa in Gqeberha. I lived in Stellenbosch for a long time. I moved there for love and for, amongst other things. Okay, so let's kick this off. What am I talking about? What is developer experience? It's to us what users experience when they work with the applications that we build. So let's just set a benchmark and then we try and compare a few solutions to that and see how they stack up, because this helps us set a path. It gives us a map of how to explore the solutions. So you need to set up in a few minutes. That is, and what I mean is be up and running. Be at a place where you can start coding as quickly as possible. That is a great win for any developer bootstrapping a project or starting on a new project. You need enough resources to develop with the full stack. In my experience, develop on a partial stack isn't really that successful. So you need to be able to develop with a full stack. It needs to be containerized so that all developers can run the same stack. That is the way that we have come to learn, to distribute that in a way that's the runtime is reproducible for all of us, so that I'm assuming how many of you use containers in your development workflow? Vast majority. It's homogeneous, it's pervasive way of doing that. Oh, sorry. Continuous integration is important for that feedback loop. Running linting and formatting and unit test in your pipeline, that immediate feedback telling you where things are failing is important. The ideal is an automatic preview environment for each and every pull request that is generated on a project. That's quite a high bar. It's the ideal, though. So if your DevOps environment can provision a preview environment for every PR, that's awesome. That means you can test that in isolation. And the final one to me is I want to use the same tools to debug my local environment, staging, sandbox, production. We develop muscle memory as developers, and if I use one set of tools for development to look at logs, and I have to use another set of tools or learn a different way when I go to staging or production, it breaks our rhythm. It is what's the word? I don't know. It causes that friction. You want to remove all of that friction. And if you can use tools that you are familiar with across all of these environments, it's a big win for developers. So how do we create that experience? I mean, I'm sure we've all tried various things. There we go. And these attempts all point to the right solution. I mean, you can cobble together scripts to do it. They're not declarative though. They're imperative. You don't know what state you are creating unless you run the script. So and maintaining scripts, running them in the right order, it's difficult to produce a reliable development environment with just scripts. Maybe they play a part in the final solution. A template is a good way to declare what our development environment should look like, and I definitely think it should play a part in whatever solution we come up with. Docker Compose allows us to, the template is too static though. We can't just use a template. We can use tools to use some inputs to make it a little bit more dynamic, but the template basically gives an output at one point in time. We want to be able to also run the application. That's where Docker Compose comes in and allows us to build containers that we can have a runtime that is the same for all of us. And we get away with this common problem of, it works on my machine, but it doesn't work on yours. And virtual machine is, Docker doesn't solve all of the problems. The implementation on Linux and Mac differs. Mac runs basically a virtual machine on Linux. You run into permission issues because if you don't do anything to the container, it runs as root and it messes up your file system. It's not really portable to a remote environment. It's designed to develop locally. So you can't quickly say, I've run out of resources with Docker. I want to deploy it in the cloud quickly and run there. Now you have to set up it's complicated. I mean, I've gone through this. I've took it as far as I could. It doesn't work. So maybe you can come and explain to me if it does, but there are better tools to do the job, easier ones to achieve the same thing. A virtual machine is a great guarantee of perfect similar environments. But they are too bulky. They're not declarative again, and it provides us with the clue of the real challenge to setting up a great developer experience. And the challenge is, if I hand you a virtual machine, I'm saying you have to use this to code, and that won't fly with most developers. We have strong preferences for the tools the IDE that we are using, the operating system that you're using. You like to code with PyCharm on Mac OS, and you like to code on VS Code in WSL, and I like to code with NeoVim on Nixos or Arch Linux. I mean, and that is the complexity. How do we appease all of this? How do we make this possible so that we can all run a stack and get the same results and reproduce it and have the same tooling and standardize? How do we do that while giving everybody the freedom to code in their favorite IDE on their favorite operating system. And welcome to my talk. I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to do it with Kubernetes and Nix. I took that out of the title, and I should actually also supplement it with all the other tools that I will cover. But what I fell in love with Kubernetes primarily with the DevOps part of my technologist heart, because it just makes things that were so incredibly difficult 20 years ago so easy. But the part that we can all love about it is the fact that it's declarative. And if that concept is, if you don't yet have a nice analogy, I'm going to try and make it concrete. For me, it's like a building plan. You are the architect, and you design the house, and you hand it to the construction company or the builder to realize it, to make it a reality. And that is what a declarative system looks like. You make the plan, something else, some other engine turns it into reality. In Kubernetes, the plan is the manifest. It's a YAML document, very similar to Docker Compose, Docker Compose manifest that also describes services and containers and environment variables and so on. It's a YAML manifest. And we hand it to Kubernetes, and it brings it, it applies it, it makes it real. It creates that state. So we tell it, this is the state I desire, you create that state. But, and so there's no, we don't run any manual commands. That is important, because manual commands get you in trouble. You cannot repeat, you don't repeat them in the same order. You run them out of sequence. You forgot which commands you run. You don't run manual commands to set up an environment where you want desired states. You declare upfront, this is the state that we want. Okay, so that's quite important. But Kubernetes just goes a step further. It not only makes it real, it keeps it like that. If a container dies, it will try to bring it back to life. And this is very important operationally. You know, please don't tell me, or you can, but let me help you not run production workloads with Docker or Docker Compose. That is what Kubernetes was designed to do, is to make sure it runs in an environment where there are enough resources with the enough resources, and it keeps it running. So don't mess with it with manual commands. Let Kubernetes keep the state. Just go back to the source and declare your desired state. So that keeps everything transparent. And if you're bad with documentation, at least you have that manifest saying, this is the state that I want. Okay, so it standardizes deployment. We can use the same tools across the board, locally, in any other environment. You get to build up your muscle memory to explore logs, shell into a container. And you can very easily switch from a local to a remote development environment. That's the real win for me. I start with my stack on this laptop, and the stack needs more and more and more and more. And at some point, I can just say, oh, switch clusters. I'm now working in a remote development environment that was spun up for me. It has plenty of RAM. It has GPUs for all the AI containers that I need to run. The resources are taken care of. I can just switch that environment without changing my workflow. It all stays the same. And the good thing about adopting Kubernetes or making it part of your workflow is the adoption is massive. I think we're not early adopters anymore. I think we are late adopters right now. There's a massive ecosystem. And that's good. That means if you're adopted, you are using a very stable API. And the problem Kubernetes is trying to solve is well defined. It's based on the, it's just networking that it abstracted with a few concepts that has a stable API and it remains stable. So your initial effort, you might have a little hump to in your learning process when you learn a few new concepts, when you maybe transition from Docker to Kubernetes, but it's absolutely worth it. And the other thing is, many of the things that were complex, that earned Kubernetes that label of complexity, are now dead simple because of the vast ecosystem and the tooling. And I'm going to show you how easy, literally in a matter of seconds or minutes, you can set up a local development environment, run on Kubernetes, and it won't kill your resources. If you go to landscape.cncf.info, you see in nice graphical form the cloud native computing foundation landscape. And these are all the projects that are either incubated in the CNCF or have graduated. So they have a very well developed process of nurturing, and these are all open source projects, all of them. and this is just the part that I can fit in on the screen. If you go there, you can page down and wide. So it's helpful even now in your late adoption of this in your workflow to have people tell you, because this is very overwhelming. So you need a guide, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to take this and we're going to pick tools that work well together and work well with Python. Last pitch for Kubernetes, it avoids the vendor lock-in. You're not locked into one specific cloud provider. What you all these cloud providers have their own Kubernetes offerings, so you can move it around, not always without friction, but very reasonably so, without too much difficulty. And you can even move it on to bare metal if you have to. I've been privileged to work on projects where we moved clients specifically from AWS resources to bare metal because they had the skills to do it. You have to decide what do you want managed and what you can manage. And that's a complex decision you have to make yourself. That's more complex than adopting Kubernetes in your local development workflow, definitely. Other opportunity this gives you is to move things that you typically think belongs outside the cluster, like managing Postgres, back into the cluster. There are operators like Cloud Native PG is a phenomenal open source project that makes it incredibly easy to run a replicated Postgres cluster, for instance. Maybe you don't care about that as a developer. I'm just saying, if you want to motivate for it, you need to motivate it to your DevOps team and your leadership and this is an important point to consider when you're making that transition. Now, this wasn't originally part of my talk. I have given this talk before, but and I'm not sure I can describe it in simple enough terms. All I want to say is that if you are a serious software engineer, you need to pay attention to what Nix is and what it does, because it is quite revolutionary, in my opinion, in my 26 years of experience with many projects and so on. And maybe I can make the penny drop very simply when I ask you if you know of a tool that can cross-platform. So one thing I should just mention, there's Nix the package manager and Nix OS, Nix OS. Nix the package manager runs on Mac. It runs on Windows. It runs on Linux, obviously. And you can use it in all of those environments to create development environments. That's what I use it for. So if you go fully on Nix OS, I guarantee you it's going to be a struggle and it's going to be a long-term process and it's going to be frustrating. You will complain about the documentation. It will be a worthwhile struggle, I promise you. But start small. Do a small, simple Nix development environment. It is revolutionary because it solves this dependency hell that we have all experienced with Python in particular. Running multiple Python versions. How the hell do we create a virtual environment this year? Oh, this year it's UV, by the way. If you've not, this year we use UV. Last year we used PyInf. The year before that, I don't know what we use, but it's always, oh no, maybe you just use the system Python, which you shouldn't ever do, by the way. Just create a virtual environment and do it with Nix. Just embrace a tool that can replace not only this PyInf or PipX, it can also replace NVM, which is the tool you use to create node virtual environments. And if you have a full stack environment, probably have a team working on a React front end and a back end team working on a Python web framework. So you need, it reduces the number of tools that you use. The way that Nix can guarantee reproducibility is by using the Nix store, is by this concept of the Nix store. It breaks the Linux file system hierarchy. It doesn't store stuff in user bin or user local bin. It doesn't install that. That is what creates the limitation of you can only have one Python 3 in your system or one version of that particular tool on your system. The Nix store enables you to have all of them without it polluting your system and without them colliding. And it does so by creating a cryptographic hash of all the build inputs for a package so that you end up with a path like nix/store/hash and then Python. So we are, and what is revolutionary about that is multiple different development environments can and reuse the same package. And it's a guarantee that the Python that I am using and prescribe to using the development environment, you are using as well. We can compare the hash. We don't have to, Nix does that for you. So here are some tools. We're getting closer to that demo. I rushed through this because I wasn't sure exactly how much time I'm getting. I'm hoping to. So these are some tools, and I'm going to connect with Python shortly. And I'm going to show and discuss each of these tools. So Kind is a project to run Kubernetes locally for development. SCAF is a project that we are developing at 6 feet up. It's basically a cookie cutter template. That's the template that I referred to earlier. I will dive into that. We manage tools with dir-env and Nix. We develop with Tilt, and we can explore the cluster with K9s. So let's start with Kind. It runs Kubernetes inside Docker. So it deploys a Docker container that basically emulates the Kubernetes API. And it was originally designed for testing and for CI, but we use it for local. It's being used for local development all over the place. Yeah, I think the little logo is quite apt. The fact that you have this whole container, the shipping container inside a bottle. And if you go to the website, you can see how quickly you can deploy a Kind cluster. There are other solutions. You can just tick the box in Docker Desktop that says enable Kubernetes, That's one option. That's an easy option for many of you. There's also Minikube. I prefer to use Kind because it allows you to create multiple different clusters. None of those other solutions do. So I can have one for one project, one Kind cluster for one project, and another one for another project, and tear the ones down that I'm not working on. So Tilt is basically a wrapper of two things, Docker and kubectl or Kubernetes. And it's probably the main actor in a local development workflow. It's what makes it pleasant. And in this space, there are also other tools, there's Scaffold and so on. But what it essentially does is you code in your favorite editor and it synchronizes the code directly into the running container without having to rebuild the container all the time. That's what Tilt does. In essence, that is the most important thing it does. I'll show you. Scaf is like a blueprint that we created. It contains it's a cookie cutter template that will deploy, that will create a development project with Python code in it for the back end, React code for the front end, all the Kubernetes manifest for local development and for sandbox and for staging. And what we do is we use this project, we use this template as a way to encode all our best practices. So we've spent, and you can, even if you don't use Scaf to bootstrap a new project or just to create a new template for yourself, you can go to Scaf to see how we do things. Like, how do we use GitHub Actions? How do you do an OIDC provider to be able to push images to a Amazon ECR repo without actually putting your AWS credentials in GitHub? So there are lots of patterns in there, and you can just look through the issues to see what we feel valuable as encoding into this template. And I think every company should have a template like this and codify your best practices in this way. You also get a lot of documentation in there on a new project that you can explore. Dir-env is a tool that automatically sets up your development environment the moment that you change into that directory, and it keeps it isolated. So you can set up environment variables for one project by changing into it, and dir-env will just look, oh, there's a .env.c file. It will populate your environment with the right environment variables, and when you change out of that directory, it unloads them again. That's what dir-env does. And then canines. I mean, how can I not love a tool with a logo like that? Canines, it's one of those tools that make exploring Kubernetes really easy. It's a terminal GUI that allows you to explore all the running containers in a Kubernetes cluster. And instead of remembering how do I see the logs of this container, you just navigate with the GUI and click on it, and it shows you the logs. Or you press S and you shell into it, and it's an amazing example of a really well-designed terminal GUI interface. Okay, so here we go. I do not have Python on my system. I don't want it on my system. It never works. That's a joke I stole from, I'll share the link some other time, from a guy that gave an impressive Nix presentation 2 years ago at a Linux conference. I can't remember his name, Michael something. I'll look it up and share it with you. But I watch it every 3 months. I watch the whole full 2 hours every now and again. So I'm just going to quickly bootstrap. I'm creating a Nix shell in which Now I have Python, by the way. I do have Python. And when I exit that shell, it's gone. Okay. So what I want to do next is I want to scaffold my demo project for PyCon 2024, and I'm going to use the scaf template, and it shouldn't take too long. Like I said, this is where we link up with Python. We're basically running cookie cutter here. You know, who knows the Python cookie cutter project? Yeah, we're running a cookie cutter template, and what is it allows us to, I'm just going to use default inputs here. It allows us to specify a few inputs. You can use a config file, or you can just like specify it on the terminal, and I'm just going to assume these things all exist, and it created the template, and now this is where scaf comes in. So we've written the shell script to streamline this experience for you. So what it does now, it creates a Kubernetes cluster with kind, and it just did. It's done. We now have a PyCon 2024 Kubernetes cluster, and what it's doing now, it's changing into that project, and it's compiling the Python dependencies. So it's running basically UV. Oh, it's actually we're using a Docker container to compile the dependencies because we want it compiled in the exact same way on each developer machine. With UV, we can probably do it outside the container, but this works absolutely fine. So we use a specific Python 3.12 latest table to compile the Docker image. While that is busy, I'm going to quickly switch back here, and I want to tell you about the scaf challenge. I should actually put the URL up here. If you go to 6feetup.com/scaf-challenge, 6feetup.com/scaf-challenge, you will get all the instructions to take part in the challenge. We just had one at DjangoCon in the US, and the challenge is, how quickly can you bootstrap your development environment and be up and running coding? And the record is 26 seconds. Now, there are tricks to do that. This is to run a local Kubernetes cluster, and we're kind of creating an awareness. This is how easy and quick it can be. You have to figure out, there are ways. 5 minutes left. Okay, thanks. There are ways to do this, but you'll have to pay me to show you. Now, I'll share it freely. It's a fun challenge. You know, just go do it. It's basically to create awareness how quickly you can really bootstrap an environment, and that it can be simple and easy. So if we come back here, UV is still, come on UV, come on. Should be faster. Compiling the dependencies. Okay, still busy. While it is still busy, let me just show you what it created. It's busy compiling the dependencies. Sorry. So these are the required dependencies that are all compiled. So we first used pip compile or UV compile to create the dependencies with hashes, and then, it's done. Okay, so now we are actually ready to start coding. So you can see stuff, I just changed into the directory and stuff happened. What it is doing, it is it's creating a new dev shell with Nix. And this ensures that we have all the packages that we need, including a specific version of Python with the packages that we need for this project. So in a declarative way, not too complex, the Nix language isn't complex. I can say these are the binaries and CLI tools that we want for this project. Those are it. It's a long list, but this is taking way too long. It should be cached. If we have to move on to Q&A, I can always let this finish and come back to it. So if we look at the K8s directory, we have a base layer, and let's just look at a manifest quickly. And so the part that is important in the manifest, should also be familiar, is that we are specifying how a container should be launched. We have an image, we have a command. This is a Django backend, so that's the command. No rocket science there. And we're telling it where to get its environment variables from. There is a app config, which is a config map is what we use in Kubernetes to specify what our configuration variables are for a specific environment. And secrets are, you guessed it, where you keep secrets. So if we look at the app config, we can specify our Django settings, our Django secret key, allowed host, and so on. This is obviously for local development. This is the manifest. Not quite sure why this is downloading now. I definitely ran through this a couple of times. It should be cached. Yeah. Anyway, once I'm done with this, I'm not getting onto that leaderboard today, by the way. You only have to do this once, so, and it usually takes seconds. This is bootstrapping your dev shell. It puts all the tools and the binaries there that are required, and then I can run tilt up, and tilt was really the thing. We can probably move on to questions, Q&A, and when this is ready, I'll just do the tilt up so that you can see how nice the tilt GUI is, and I'll show you what it looks like in K9s and so on.
Okay, Roché, thank you very much for your remarks. Are there any questions?
Hi. I've got a couple of questions, so I'll break in between. First of all, on these stacks, how do you mock data? Do you just do like a skeleton of data, or how does that work?
Well, these stacks don't really prescribe how you. When you are talking about mocking data, you're already in your development language or your development environment. So you would mock them in the way that you currently do? Or what is it that you... Okay. So that doesn't change. The way that your Python project works and looks and mocks data doesn't change at all. That's still the same. You still mock them in the same way.
Okay, yeah. Maybe a little bit more on that. The database having example data in there.
Okay.
Is that something? I can see that's not something that you necessarily do when you start up on a new project. But is that something that you would typically do add some data to a database as part of this process for the developer to work on?
I see where you're going. I mean, I guess that to me is an artifact of the project. It's a very specific, so it doesn't, and it contributes, I agree, it does contribute to the developer experience, because starting with a blank database sometimes makes it impossible. So I think it's a good point to raise, that you need to think, what fixtures are you adding to your project to make the bootstrapping quick and easy. So I'm not really doing that when going through these tools, because that's project specific, but it's definitely an important consideration.
Cool, thanks.
We've got a couple of questions. Just if we could keep it brief, just because of time.
Hey man, thank you for the presentation. My two questions are, from your experience, how have you achieved remote debugging within a Kubernetes cluster with microservices? So I want to spin up a service on my local environment, and it needs to connect into the cluster and have service discovery and all that kind of stuff. How have you achieved that?
That is a really good question. So right now in SCAF, we have a setup that works quite easily with PyCharm, where you can spin up the Django process, and it will attach to the PyCharm debugger. But that's not usually when I start, when I explain to developers how to do that. I show them how to do it with the breakpoint, because that's like a Swiss Army knife of debugging. So, and very simply put, all you do is you change the command of the container, you tell it to sleep forever, you shell into your container, you put your breakpoint in your code, Tilt will sync it into the container, and you start up your Python web framework. Done. And because you've shelled in, you start the container, you hit the breakpoint, you're right there in the debugger IDE, your Python, the Python IDE, where you can debug the code exactly where you put the breakpoint. There are, again, VS Code plugins that allow you to do that. With Docker, you can attach to a container. There's Microsoft actually contributed a really cool library called DebugPy, and all it does is it wraps your running process, and it connects to a port, or make that port available, and you connect to it with your IDE. And you can literally connect to it with PyCharm, with NeoVim's debugging tools, with VS Code debugging tools. DebugPy really it wraps the process, makes it available on a port, and you specify on which port. And Node and NPM package already supports that. It exposes that port. So it is difficult to get to the solution, but once you are there, it's actually quite simple.
Cool. Thank you for your talk. I really appreciate the tools that you suggested. I'll definitely try it out. Just have a question about your local development. I mean, you mentioned you had Django there. I always found it difficult to debug Django locally if it's in a Docker environment. You have to execute the container and go to Django shell and debug. Is that still a recommended process you would suggest? Doing local development. Using Django Docker.
Like outside of containers, or
outside of containers, yes.
Not at all. No, I am all for containers. I would not. You can do everything that you do outside the container so much better, in a much more reproducible and reliable way inside the container. I think I would go as far as it's almost unfair to ask a developer to install these stacks locally directly on their host. That's something that should be just part of the project. I'm all in with containers.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, due to time, I'm not going to take any more questions. I want to thank again our speaker, Roché Compaan, and if you have more questions, he'll be hanging around slightly after the session. We'll break for tea now, and the sessions resume at 11:30.